Hey everyone, welcome to this week's PC Gaming News. I'm pretty excited for this episode as we have a lot of MMO stories to cover this week, which makes me happy, but also sad because it's not all good news. For starters, we're going to dive into some of the specifics about why EverQuest Next was canceled. I'm sure you might remember that game. That was the next iteration of EverQuest, and I don't think I'll ever get over the fact that we will never get to play it. I'll also be talking about Lost Ark's unsurprising delay, the game now launching in 2022. We'll take a look at the pinata of colors that is Pearl Abyss's new game, DokeV. We've got some interesting tidbits about Riot's Runeterra MMO, and I'll touch on the upcoming test for the hardcore PvP game, Mortal Online 2. Quite a bit to cover here. I think this is going to be a really interesting episode, but before we jump into the details, it's time for a word from today's sponsor. Come on, of course, you knew it was time for that. Today's video is sponsored by World Flipper. This is a game that blends RPG elements and pinball-centric gameplay with vibrant 2D retro-style pixel graphics. You'll gather resources, collect units, and grow their powers with these near-endless combinations of characters, skills, and weapons for you to take into battle. The gameplay in World Flipper is the unique combination of this reaction-based precision of pinball with various RPG mechanics like using skills, progressing heroes, boss raids for equipment, and utilizing your team's composition. Beyond having a main storyline for you to play through, there are also special events, daily dungeon challenges, and boss battles which you can do in groups of up to 3. There's over 100 heroes and 150 weapons to collect, each with their own skills, and the game offers plenty of customization, letting you fine-tune your combat. So if you're interested in checking it out, you can use the link below to pre-register on the World Flipper website and receive in-game rewards, including the powerful 4-star unit Arisa and some lodestar beads, which are the in-game currency. All right, so now let's go ahead and jump into this week's top stories. So the first one we're going to talk about is EverQuest Next. A couple of weeks ago, we got some really interesting behind-the-scenes details on what exactly happened with the development and eventual cancellation of the game. As part of this long-standing interview series hosted by former SOE developer Sean Lord, he sat down and spoke at length with Jeff Butler, who was a key player in the development of EverQuest Vanguard and EverQuest Next. In the roughly 3-hour interview, they covered various aspects of the development process for each of those games. Most interestingly to me, though, were the bits of new information about the development and downfall of EQ Next. This game was one of my most anticipated MMOs ever, and it never saw the light of day outside of that tech test that was Landmark, letting us screw around and build some things with the game's voxel-based engine. Yeah, Landmark was neat, but it needed lots of work, and it certainly was not the fully fleshed out MMO that we were waiting for. So first of all, in the interview, Butler addressed what was easily the biggest question on my mind, which was just what happened with EverQuest Next that led to its cancellation. Apparently, it was more than just the reasons gave when the game was officially canceled in 2016. During the press release announcing the cancellation, Daybreak said, "Inherent to the creative process are dreaming big, pushing hard, and being brutally honest with where you land. In the case of EverQuest Next, we accomplished incredible feats that astonished industry insiders. Unfortunately, as we put the pieces together, we found that it wasn't fun. So simply put, they thought the game wasn't fun enough and they couldn't see a path to making it so." Now, when asked what he thinks the real reasons were for the cancellation, Butler said, "My feeling is that when I left, there was no one left to push for EverQuest Next. No one at the highest level. Dave Georgeson was gone, I was gone, and the game left with us." So he feels that without the proper motivation from the top, the game didn't have enough of the right people pushing to continue its development. Now, if you don't recall, the other person he's referring to here, Dave Georgeson, was the very animated public-facing figure seen at various showcase events for EQ Next. In fact, it was his enthusiasm alone that got me initially interested and excited about the game. Seeing someone just so genuinely passionate and believing in something that they're working on can be very contagious, and watching Georgeson talk about Next was exactly that. But it goes beyond them not being able to find the fun and not having the right people at the top pushing for the game. Evidently, and this was news to me, the version of EverQuest Next that we saw was their 7th attempt at making the game. This iteration of EverQuest had only been worked on for a fairly short time, according to Butler. The previous iterations were almost impossible to count. There were 7 subsets of what was going to be the next EverQuest. They'd work on it for a little while, scrap it, and build it up again. So I guess this explains why, when Daybreak took over in 2016 and the game still wasn't shaping up to be what they hoped for, or just wasn't near enough to being complete given they had only been working on it for a fairly short time, that's why they decided to scrap it all together. The development was already 7 attempts in, and with Daybreak now at the helm, apparently they weren't interested in funding attempt number 8. Of course, when asked, Butler says that he sure thinks what they had was good enough. We had some amazing things in progress. The tech was untested and untried. It was something completely unique, a completely destructible, editable, voxel-based world in a massively multiplayer game. Even today, no one has attempted to do something like it. He goes on to say, not a day goes by that I don't regret seeing how successful that game could have been. And I am right there with him. Not that I know anything about like how the game was, its development or anything, just the concepts and features that they were talking about and showing for EverQuest Next were really, really interesting. And we did get a little taste of what that could have been with Landmark. I personally really loved everything from the art direction to how the gameplay looked in those early footage videos that they showed. It really is a shame that SOE was bought by Daybreak, and even more of a shame that Daybreak didn't think it was worth continuing the game's development. But given they were looking at the 7th attempt at making the game, if it really wasn't anywhere near what they deemed as headed in the right direction, I'm not all that surprised. Sometimes I do wonder though if the MMO landscape of today would look any different had EverQuest Next completed development and launched. Maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but we'll never know. This week we also got the upsetting but expected news that Lost Ark has been delayed. Initially scheduled to come out this fall, the game will now be releasing sometime early next year. In the announcement post, they gave a few of their own reasons for the delay, which I will go into, but there's some pretty obvious things they don't mention that I think certainly played a role. For one, this fall has turned out to be a very busy time for MMOs. Corepunk has a beta planned this December, Final Fantasy XIV is launching their Endwalker expansion on November 23rd, Mortal Online 2 has a beta soon and is going into early access in October, Elion is coming out later this month, and one of the most likely causes for the delay, Amazon, who is publishing Lost Ark in the West, is also launching their own MMO. Of course, I'm talking about New World, coming out in just a few weeks on September the 28th. So outside of them not wanting to compete with MMOs from other companies, Amazon isn't interested in competing with their own MMO. Since we learned that New World was delayed from August to September, I immediately suspected we would hear something about Lost Ark getting delayed. Not because New World coming out later has any direct impact on how ready or not Lost Ark is, but because Amazon, the publisher, obviously doesn't want to impede with the launch of their own game. With all of the delays New World has gotten and all of the money they most certainly have poured into it, Amazon wants to put the game in as good a position as possible to succeed, and publishing another already highly anticipated game in the same genre shortly after launching their own would absolutely affect its success negatively. There's no question. Amazon is more interested clearly in New World doing well because it's their baby. It's also quite possibly the last chance Amazon Game Studio has, given their multiple failed attempts at launching successful products so far. They are like 0 for 5 when it comes to developing and completing and having good games release. New World really needs to do well, and they are much more concerned about New World doing well than they are about launching Lost Ark this year. I mean, that pretty much goes without saying. But none of this are the reasons they gave. According to the Twitter post announcing the game's delay, they say, while delving into all of the great feedback and data generated by our alpha and reviewing recent changes to the Korean version that we want to include in our release, we discovered a lot more work that will be needed to launch Lost Ark at the high quality bar our players deserve. As players have been waiting for so long, we want to take the time to do it right while also ensuring we look after the wellness of our hardworking Amazon Games and Smilegate teams. With that in mind, we've made the tough decision to push Lost Ark to early 2022. So they take the typical line of we want to make the game better. We just need some more time. And that's a good line. I have no problems with it. For the same reasons I've been fine with all of New World's delays. Like, make and launch the best version of your games possible. That is a good idea. We've had plenty of examples in recent years of what can happen when you rush to launch a game, and we don't need any more of those. They do go on to say that the game will be having a closed beta test in early November from the 4th to the 9th for anyone who purchased a Founders Pack. You can also register for a chance to be invited over on the game's website. Personally, while I am a little bummed, like I would have loved to play this soon, I'm also kind of okay with the delay. Reason being, there's a lot coming out in the next couple of months. Like, I am very excited to play Lost Ark. I have been waiting for and anticipating this game for years, but there are so many new titles coming out, especially MMOs this fall. If I have to wait until next year when things have slowed down a little bit to play Lost Ark, that's probably going to mean that I just end up spending more time with the game overall. So as someone who likes to play a variety of games and especially loves MMOs, I'm happy that things are getting spaced out a little bit. But I know there's a lot of people who have been waiting for Lost Ark for like 5 years, and they're pissed off because they want to play it as soon as possible. I empathize. I get it. Just for me personally, I'm kind of okay with the delay. Next up, we're going to be talking about a new game from Pearl Abyss. During last week's Gamescom, they announced this new title called DokeV. It's a not MMO. Well, initially they did call it an MMO, and then within a couple of hours they said, nah, it's not one anymore, and they removed any mention of it from their website or videos. It was just a really, really strange situation, and not the first time this has happened with Pearl Abyss. You might remember something similar happening with Crimson Desert. Originally, they called it a new MMO in the Black Desert universe, and then they changed direction and genres later on, but that took them at least a couple of months, if I recall correctly. DokeV changed genres in a single afternoon. It's just so mind-blowing. Like, how do you get to the point where you're setting up for this major press conference and writing all of your copy and games descriptions, calling it an MMO, and then at the last minute being like, hold up, wait, no, it's not one, I'm just kidding, it's something else. Anyway, whatever the game's genre isn't really important here. I just found the announcement and the retraction of its genres really fascinating. So what is DokeV then? Well, it's certainly something pretty interesting looking. As far as the genre is concerned, they're now calling it an open world multiplayer action adventure game that's all about exploring this bright, colorful world, collecting creatures, and doing all sorts of stuff with other people. The gameplay footage that they've released so far showcases a wide range of things that you can do. You can skateboard, ride bikes and rollerblades, you can do surfing, fishing, there's this gliding with these umbrellas. They show you playing all sorts of different children's like yard games. It's really cool. We also saw several bits of action combat, some sequences where you're fighting the different creatures in the game with these very over-the-top attack and animations. Basically, it looks like a game that's blending social elements with lots of activities for you to do with other players, with that action combat and exploration of this really unique, gorgeous-looking world. And I gotta hand it to Pearl Abyss here. This game does look super appealing. It certainly has left an impression. Now, beyond all of the mini games, activities, and the exploration, the main focus, like I said, is on the collection of these creatures. These are called DokeB or DokeBi or something. Sorry, pronunciations. So as you progress through the story, basically you will meet, battle, and ultimately save these creatures, acquiring them to like your collection basically. And in doing so, this will unlock further bits of story, events, and activities specific to each of the DokeB. Every one of the creatures in this game have their own unique history, personality, and capabilities that you can actually use to aid you in future battles. For the game's combat, they said that they've tried to embody the Pearl Abyss style of action combat, while also putting a lot of effort into its presentation and style, trying to make it more easy to get into and accessible to a large audience. They also mentioned in the development process, one of their main goals in making this game was to create something that adults could play with their children by having something that looks great, but also plays well and is just a world that's fun to spend time in. So there have been no specifics about when this will be launching, but it will be coming to PC and consoles. I've already seen a bunch of people concerned because it's Pearl Abyss. What kind of monetization is this game going to have? And I think that's a perfectly reasonable and fair concern. But if we can put the monetization aside, I've enjoyed my time I've spent with Pearl Abyss's games. I mean, specifically, do they only have the one that I've played? I think so. Black Desert was really fun. Its monetization is pretty tough to wrap your head around. Monetization arguments aside, which it's hard to put them aside, I have no doubt that this will probably be a good and fun game to play. We recently got some potentially interesting details about Riot's upcoming Runeterra MMO. These came via game director Mark Yetter in a few posts that he made to Twitter. First was an image of the Runeterra world map. Now with it, he said, so many places to go, people to see, just brimming with possibility. Today's one of those head exploding with creativity days. On the map, we see various islands and notable marked locations in the Runeterra universe. Now I should note here, this is the same exact map that is seen on the League of Legends website, where it's used as a showcase for a bit of lore and backstory of League's universe, Runeterra. I suppose what's interesting here though is whether or not they'll be using this as just a reference point, or if the Runeterra MMO will use this exact map structure and layout. Now if previous MMOs based on existing universes are any indication, the final map in Riot's upcoming MMO may be similar, but not exactly like this one, and odds are it will be launching with only some of the regions available, giving them room to expand. I think a good example of this would be what ESO has done with Tamriel. When the game launched, they had like roughly half of the map filled in and playable, and then in the preceding years, they've been adding new regions with various updates for people to go to. Wouldn't you be surprised if they do that with the Runeterra MMO? Now, the next day, he also retweeted some really cool concept art from Legends of Runeterra's principal character, artist Chris Campbell. These showcase a variety of different Scion followers. And while this is coming from an artist working on another Riot game, given it's in the same universe, some people online have been speculating that this art may be used directly or just as inspiration for the MMO as well, or it could just be that Yetter was supporting and liking the art of someone he works with. That is highly likely too. Even with how little we know about this project, I do have very high hopes for the Runeterra MMO. Riot certainly has the budget to make a good, high quality game, and even though I've never personally gotten into League of Legends myself, I did spend a bit of time with Valorant and I really liked it, and I've also heard mostly good things about Legends of Runeterra. It's just great to see this company branching out into different genres, and I'm really hopeful. I think this is one of the like high profile MMOs on our horizon of, you know, the next 5 years or so that probably has the best chance of succeeding just because of the company it's coming from and their pedigree and the work that they've done so far. Upcoming hardcore PvP MMO Mortal Online 2 has a playtest starting soon. This will be running from September the 6th to the 12th and is available to anyone who's interested in playing. This is going to be an open stress test that is meant to push the game's servers to their limits, and for that reason, I would not go in expecting a perfectly smooth experience. In fact, from what I've heard and seen from prior tests, even when they're not pushing their servers, we shouldn't expect a perfectly smooth experience. Not meant as a dig, by the way. The game is still in early development. We will give it time. But yeah, things are kind of on the rough side at the moment. So Mortal Online 2, if you don't know, is this game that is clearly looking to cater to a specific audience, that being the hardcore full loot PvP crowd. It is a tough crowd to please, and it's also seemingly a tough genre to make work, although we do have some successful examples. Most notably, Albion Online is a game that's doing great right now among all of the other big name MMOs on the market, and that game does have full loot PvP. Now, beyond its full loot PvP nature, Mortal Online 2 also features a complex crafting system with millions of combinations, they say. It's got skill-based first-person melee mounted ranged and magic combat, deep character customization, an open skill system with over 600 skills and no character levels, and a massive sandbox world to explore and fight for. I will be jumping in to check out the test next week. I would like to give this game a good look. I am keeping my expectations to a minimum, as it is still in early development, but there are some neat ideas here, and I am always down to try something new, even if I just end up getting PK'd and having all of the loot that I spent hours grinding for to create. Whatever. It's probably going to happen, especially since I tend to play my MMOs, at least leveling. I do a lot of solo stuff. I'll probably get obliterated in this game, but whatever. I want to check it out. So those are the top stories of the week. I do want to cover a couple of other notable things here, though. First of all, New World released 2 brand new trailers. The first one was just panning of these slow motion battle sequences. Really, this might as well be an ad. I mean, I guess, yes, all trailers for games are pretty much ads, but as ad trailers go, this one was kind of lame in my opinion. The other video was a 5-minute detailed look at the backstory of the corrupted and enemy faction. This follows similarly styled videos that they've already done for the Ancients and the Angry Earth. These are kind of cool, I think, especially if you're into like world building and lore in your MMOs. Plus, the narrator's accent has me believing ist Deutsch, which is sehr toll oder wunderbar. Okay, that's enough German for today. The indie MMO TitanReach has halted development. This is that game that was aiming to basically be a modern day RuneScape. Bad news is that they've run out of funding and the studio has had to stop any further work on the game. Over on the developers Discord channel, they posted an update saying that their hopes were to use the progress made in 2021 to get additional investment, but that never ended up happening and they have now run out of money. So for now, the team is looking for new work so that, you know, they can pay their bills and live their lives basically, and they will be continuing development of TitanReach at what they're calling a hobbyist rate, which basically means in their spare time. Now here's where things might get a little sticky though. Basically what's happening here is if you spent any money from August 9th onward, there will be refunds available. However, anyone who made purchases between December and August 8th is out of luck. That money has already been used, which is pretty bad news. I will be very curious to see not only how the future development goes, but also what happens for all those people who spent money that can't get refunds. I'm guessing that really all depends on whatever the terms were that they purchased these things under. If nothing else, this is yet another example of just how risky it is to spend money on crowdfunded or Kickstarter games. Buyer beware, I guess. No Man's Sky launched their Frontiers update this past week. This is the 17th free update to the game. Introduces a new town management system. Players can now take over running their own procedurally generated settlements, managing its inhabitants, buildings, layout, and functions. Every time I've tried to check out No Man's Sky, I end up getting really bored really quick, but I do gotta say, it's been impressive just seeing the sheer volume of updates that have come to this game since its release. This thing basically went from a meme to a shining example of what post-launch support could look like. And finally, Star Citizen recently released its monthly update detailing progress on some pyro features, vehicles, and a new mission type. If you care about the specifics, those will be available on their official site. For me, seeing the story was just another reminder that yeah, Star Citizen is still in development. I joked recently on Twitter that when we first learned about this game, people who were in kindergarten are now like in sophomore, juniors in high school. And I think by the time Star Citizen finishes development and launches, some of them will have graduated college. It's just a crazy arc. I don't know what else to say. All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's PC Gaming News. As always, I appreciate you guys checking out my stuff. Hope you enjoy it. There's some really cool stories this week. A lot of interesting stuff to dive into, even if it wasn't all the happiest news. A lot of games getting canceled and talking about why they were canceled. MMOs are just rife with issues. But hey, you know what? The future is looking bright. There's a lot of really cool games coming out in this year and the coming years. So pretty cool stuff. All right, thank you guys for watching. As always, appreciate your support. I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.